in this video we're going to talk a bit more about refraction of light. But remember, in terms of refraction of light, refraction just means bending. So we're going to talk a bit more about bending of light. But in this video we're going to focus on the bending of light in the eye and how the eye can use the lens, the cornea, the vitreous and aqueous humor to bend the light to hit it on one specific spot in terms of the actual back of the eye on the retina itself. So we're going to talk about refraction of light, but in terms of the eye itself. And remember, in the last video we talked a bit about the way light bends. We said that there was two mediums. The medium was just anything that light passes through, travels through. So medium 1 and medium 2. And we said that in this case medium 1 might have been the air, right? So it moves from the air and moves into water. So medium 2 would have been the water. So light will bend under a couple of conditions. If there's a change in density, and then we said that, for example, water is more dense than air, right? So water is a high density and air is low density. And then we can use that same thing is described by something called the refractive index. The refractive index is just showing you how much light will bend. Something that has higher density will have a higher refractive index. So you can see water has higher density, so therefore it has a higher refractive index of 1.331 compared to air, which has a lower refractive index because it has lower density, and it has a refractive index of 1.00296. Don't remember those numbers, don't have to. All I'm trying to say is air low density and water high density, therefore water bends light more than air. But in terms of what you should also remember is that when light comes in, if it travels on the normal, remember the normal was just, if we have this as the boundary, right, this is the actual gap between medium 1 and medium 2, in this case water and air, and at 90 degrees we draw something called the normal, which is just a straight line. We imagine this to be a straight line, but we can use that to kind of predict what will happen. So that's going to be there at 90 degrees. Now if light travels on this normal, if light travels on that, there's going to be no bending. So if light travels on it, there's not going to be bend at all. If it travels on the normal, so at 90 degrees towards the surface, no bending happens. But if it travels from, for example, from medium 1 and hits surface at an angle, so here this angle is not 90, it's something else, then it's going to, in this case it's going from low density to high density, it's going to go and bend towards the normal. It's going to change its direction, it's going to refract towards the normal. Right? That's what we said in the last video. But now I'm going to talk about all that in terms of the eye and how the eye helps us to be able to use these different principles, the principles of refraction of light between two mediums, to be able to bend the light to make it go on to one spot. Alright, so we said that all objects emit light, either directly by emitting light like a light source, or indirectly by reflecting light from, for example, the sun. So all objects emit light. Now that light still needs to arrive at the back of our eye to make sure we get a proper image. So in this case, for example, in these two images, I have labeled different parts. So the first part here, this is C, this gray part, C, and that stands for cornea. Right, so that's the cornea. Then I have this bluish, light bluish part, which I'll say is A. A stands for aqueous humor. The red part, that will stand for L, as in lens, and then the blue is V for vitreous humor. These are the four that are mentioned in dot point. The dot point says identify the cornea, aqueous humor, lens, and vitreous humor as refractive media. So refractive means again that was bending. So refractive media just means parts of our eye that help us bend light. That's what refractive media is. So these four parts are parts of our eye that help us bend light. So you're going to have, initially light is going to be bent most when it goes from the actual air, which is all the white here is meant to be air, right? That's meant to be air. And it's going to be bent most when it goes from the air and hits the actual cornea. And that's going to be when the most of the bending happens. But my first example, this actual ray, so I'm going to talk about this ray here. This one here. This one will actually not bend. It will just go straight. Why? Because if this were the surface, right? So the surface is right here between cornea and the air. what I've chosen a surface where the normal that you have to draw at 90 degrees will actually be parallel, will be exactly in line with the light ray that comes in. So in this light ray will just travel along the normal, it won't bend, and it will just keep going. It's meant to be going straight, my bad attempt at drawing straight, and it will go straight towards that back of the eye point. Whereas in this case, if we've got a light ray, for example, coming from here, so maybe from the side, right? So if I were to zoom in that point where this other light ray is coming in, it comes in at a bit of a bend point. So if this were the point, so the gap between the two, the boundary, then we would have to draw, remember, the normal is at 90 degrees to the boundary, so it's going to be roughly here. So in this case, if this light ray comes like so, it's not traveling in line, with the normal, it's traveling slightly bent at a different angle, which means it's going to reflect, towards the normal. So it's going to change direction, it's going to bend towards normal. So what that means is when this one actually hits this area, it's going to bend towards normal, it's going to refract towards normal, which means we can focus it, right? So this one, there will be one light ray going straight in, but then there will be other ones that will be actually bent to make sure they can all hit kind of one area. You don't need to remember the exact procedure, you don't need to remember that. Dot one doesn't say explain, it just says identify. But I'm just trying, so yeah, don't panic if you don't completely get it. Just remember that these different types of, the way that refraction works just means that light itself will be bent as long as we have some kind of refractive media that can make sure that bending occurs. And the refractive media are the cornea. There's going to be the vitreous humor. It's going to be the lens. It's going to be the actual aqueous humor. So those four, the ones here, are the ones I've labeled here. And these are the ones that are responsible to help. So there's going to be a bit of bending happening at the cornea, a bit more bending happening when it meets the next medium, so the actual aqueous humor, a bit more bending happening when it hits the lens, and then more bending when the vitreous humor. So every time it goes from one medium into the next, it's going to be a bit more bending until eventually it's going to be straight, pointing towards that focal point. Right? That's basically what I want you to get out of this. Just know that the cornea, aqueous humor, lens, and vitreous humor are the refractive media, so the parts of the eye that help to make sure that light rays that come from all different points are hitting that one zone, hitting that one point. Without them, we wouldn't be able to focus it on one focal point. I hope that was useful.